that we do, and independent of you know, a demographic or you know, who exactly is taking these opportunities and not, because the work is important across everyone who's doing it. So seen a lot of great change, and man, we're still having this conversation.
Yeah, well, thanks, Rebecca. I mean, we'll dig into that. I'm just fascinated by all of you guys because you all come from such different backgrounds and different perspectives, and I just can't wait to dive in. And I know that everyone watching will probably have a whole bunch of questions as well, particularly not just questions. If you want to gain clarification from any of our panelists, like please ask, throw it into the chat, throw it into the Q&A part of Zoom, and I'll make sure that we bring that into the conversation throughout. This is a conversation that needs to be had. It needs to be ongoing. And today you can consider this as sort of a start of a dialogue that I think hopefully all of us, maybe even this panel, you know, we can continue this over time as well. So why don't we dive in? Let's get into the meat of the chat today. I thought we could set the stage. And Rebecca, I was thinking just about what you just said. You know, I know that you've worn many, many hats in your career, like you've done so many different things. Say I'm just totally oblivious to this topic. I have no clue. Why do you think women need to build technical skills? Why is that critical?
Yeah, this is kind of part of the founding mission of Flatiron School, and it's about workforce participation in the skills that will drive the economy, that already are driving the economy. We know that talent and capability are equally distributed across the population. Opportunities to gain those skills and opportunities to flex them and use them in the labor force are not. If you look at the demographics, it's obvious of who's in tech and who's not in tech. So to me, we need to kind of close that gap of who's participating in the most in-demand, lucrative, high potential careers and who's not. I also think that yeah, I think we've all had stories, and I don't know, Deeps, you're probably going to get to this, about kind of what it means to be the underrepresented person in the room and how much energy that takes and how exhausting it is and how it pulls from your ability to do your best work. So the more women, the more underrepresented groups who are not currently in those rooms, right? The more people can see themselves represented around the table while they're doing the work, the less distracting it is for any one group to be able to do their best work in a given environment. And again, we're talking about technical skills and technology jobs, some of the most in-demand jobs in the current economy and in the future economy. It's important that groups have equal access and equal participation in those kinds of opportunities.
I mean, and I think when you think about underrepresentation, unless we take, you know, intentional action, you know, those things don't change. And Naya, I know that, you know, prior to this, we were having a conversation about it. This is actually more complex than just, you know, just sort of, it's multi-layered, right? It's multifaceted. I'd love to get your thoughts on, you know, what Rebecca just said around, you know, being able to bring through underrepresented women, particularly around these technical skills.
Yeah, even with the question of, yeah, why is it important that women have these kinds of skills? A lot of times it's not that, you know, women and other demographics don't find it important, is that there's all these barriers to entry to gain the tech skills, and then once they're gained, to further their career by actually utilizing them in a career environment. And so when we think about barriers to entry when it comes to education and being one of 2 women in a classroom in tech, and so in a tech course, and now when it comes to the educational piece, you're less likely to have good relationships with classmates and whatnot, because you don't have that same camaraderie that the other males of the group have. But okay, you overcome that and you somehow get a degree. Now it's time for you to go through the job hunting, and your interviewers are all men. And that's actually something I have pointed out in an interview before, where a interviewer was talking about how passionate they are about diversity and inclusion. And I pointed that out. I was like, well, the thing is, I've only been interviewed by men. I've had 3 rounds and I've met about 6 of you and I've only been interviewed by men. What do you have to say about that piece of things? And say you get past the interview and you get the job. Now you're at the job and it's very hard to get promotions because you aren't being invited for beer nights and talking about the same topics. And you're on a floor of men talking about all of these things that you can't relate to and they can't relate to you. And so now when it comes to promotions, say you have the same exact skills as other people and you're being considered for promotions, but at the end of the day, when it comes to, okay, these people are the same in skill sets and everyone can do a great job, the person selecting is going to pick the person that they feel a bond with. And so it's just so multi-layered, and there's just so many ways we need to approach this, from an educational standpoint to a recruiting standpoint to promotional and careers. And it's a lot.
It is a lot. And it's actually interesting when I think about Rose's role at Allstate. Do you see that need to address it from sort of a multifaceted, like there's probably a social element to it, there's an educational element to it, there's even a mentorship and a coach. Like, how do you think about, when we sort of ask the question around why do we need women to build these technical skills, it's easy to look at it as a binary answer and say, oh, it's because, the opportunities in the future are all going to be digital and technical. And that's kind of how I introduced the topic. But clearly, there's many more parts to this. How do you think about it inside of Allstate?
It's hard to do, right? So we have to partner. I sit in human resources, so I sit shoulder to shoulder with my peers that lead our diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives and our talent acquisition initiatives. So there's definitely the front end of how are we looking to change the way that we're recruiting in for roles like this? Because if all we're seeing are men applying for our technical roles, there has to be a question of, we know there's women out there studying this, getting degrees. Why are they not applying? Is it that we're not putting the job postings out there in the right spot? Is it that the way we've written the job posting is incredibly masculine? And so subconsciously women are turned off from applying for our jobs. So super, super layered. I think where I get to focus a lot of my energy is on our existing employees and asking if we have jobs that we know are going away, right? That's what's going on with the digitalization of all businesses. Is there's jobs we're just not going to need people to do anymore. But it doesn't mean there's not more jobs that are being created. And how do we bridge that gap in between? And it's very, very hard to address the women in our company and convince them that they too can go and learn these technical skills. I say, oh, I'm not that. And I think too, unfortunately, what some companies did in the early stages of this reskilling and upskilling boom, starting about 4 or 5 years ago, is they're like, we're going to teach everybody how to code. And like that wasn't actually reasonable or something. And so a lot of people, when I still say, well, we're going to help you get the new skills that you'll need for the future, they'll say, well, I'm not really interested in learning how to code. Yeah. There are so many more things than just being a coder that you can go and do and how this is going to impact. So I agree with Naya that there are so many layers to this, and we have to address as companies the way we're looking externally and the way we're looking internally to be able to break all those barriers down.
Great. And we'll dig into some of the specifics around how we might address those things. But I also have another question, which is timing, and it's connected to why, right? Like it's why build these skills, but why do it now? I'd love to hear, Yael, your thoughts, and particularly now, because I know we've just gone through and we're still going through, the last 2 years have been just, terrible in some aspects. So why do you think now is absolutely critical? And do you think we're playing catch up when it comes to building these skills for women? And Saima, I'd love your thoughts on top of that as well, if you wouldn't mind adding.
Yeah, I think so. I think now is a really poignant question to ask, particularly on the tail end or on the heels of COVID. And the reality is that while we made tremendous progress, never enough, and it's considerably more that needs to be done. A lot of that was actually wiped away with the reality that a disproportionate burden was hit
to people from all underrepresented backgrounds, but women in a very big way. When you think about, I'm not a parent, but for those who are parents, I literally cannot imagine the last 18 months having to deal with all of the things on top of regular parenting. Everything from schools, everything from taking care of, like meals, like all of the logistics of life that often disproportionately end up being burdened by those who typically identify as women, means that and it's understandable in some ways that this is an unprecedented shock to the system, but it unfortunately wiped away a lot of progress that we had, and a lot of women left the workforce and are going to be struggling even more to get back. And so as we sort of climb the corporate ladder, so to speak, try to get more women placed in all of these opportunities, we then also have to claw our way back this loss that we've had over the last 18 months. And that's true for people from a variety of underrepresented backgrounds. But so I wanted to start with that. So when we talk about, why now, with the rapid kind of pace of technological change, that's not going to slow down literally anytime soon, right? So we have to figure this out. We have to play catch up. We have to be intentional. To Rosa's point, I love that she said like job descriptions. We have to be proactively thinking about, do I really need someone with 5 to 10 years of experience? Or if someone with 4.5 years of experience who applied for the job because they're a male and think that they're qualified, whereas 4.5 years as a woman is like not going to make you want to apply for the job because you don't think you're qualified? Am I being intentional and thoughtful about the ways that I am structuring my process from the job description, from the way that I'm structuring my interview pipeline, both for internal and external candidates? Am I being intentional about the panel, not just the candidates that I'm bringing in, but the actual panel? To Naya's point, right? Like if you don't see yourself represented in a group, like how are you really going to actually be able to like identify with the people that you're interviewing with, and do you feel safe, and do you feel like you can actually be your best self in that environment? We have to be proactively thinking about our blind spots, and something for me that was really eye-opening was in my last startup. I'll never forget kind of like scrolling through just pages, dozens of men on like hired with 4 to 6 years of experience, and a lot of people who did not necessarily like. I would find occasionally a kid who was like 18 and a male who would say that he had like 10 years of experience coding, and I'd be like, oh, okay, that's interesting. And then when I would go and look for like, where are the women, I would just be curious, like, let me go click on the 2 to 4 years of experience, and all of the women with 3.5 years of experience were in that 2 to 4 year bucket. And I was like, okay, so if I'm not being proactively intentional about trying to unblock and solve for these barriers, I'm not going to be able to find those candidates, right? So if I'm not doing that work, I'm going to miss out on great talent. And then also, if you're not being intentional about the process, right? If you're like, okay, well, that's a lot of work. Like, are they really qualified? Make sure that you're structuring a really good process and trying to eliminate bias as much as you can throughout your actual interview process to make sure that you're trying to be objective and having, standardized question lists and having things so that you're not just having people try to see if they can relate to the candidate. And so therefore, then you end up with people who have unconscious bias saying like, oh, well, this is a person who I can relate to more, even if that means it's possible that it's, because, they might look a similar way or, be from a similar background. So all of these different types of things are things we already had to solve. And this is a large and growing problem. And on top of that, the fact that we're dealing in an environment that was an unprecedented shock to the system and really wiped away a lot of the gains that we'd made means that it is now more important than ever to be really proactive and thoughtful and intentional about how we're addressing this throughout the entire people stack. Everything from talent to learning and development. And I spend most of my time in kind of enterprise land, but really everything in the full stack of being really thoughtful and intentional about being inclusive, not just to women, all underrepresented groups, but for the entire kind of population of candidates.
Let's actually take something that you said around there, because it seems like there's some massive structural challenges, right? Like there's structural ongoing challenges. There's the short-term damage, I guess, immediate impact, kind of the shock waves as a result of what's happened over the last 18 months. Simon, I'm going to sort of change this question slightly, just based on your experience, of of bringing in, you know, technology in various fields, in academics, research, design. Where do you think we need to address some of these challenges? Because I also suspect, and I'm going to come back to this later, is there's a motivation issue, there's a self-confidence issue, there's some personal issues as well from someone applying for a job or trying to move up inside of an organization. We'll come back to the employee side, but just like, do you think these issues, clearly the shockwaves recently are big, but where do you think these issues stem? What are some of the things we could potentially do structurally that could change, you know, we could start to sort of think through around addressing?
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's a big question.
Huge question. Yeah. How long have we got?
Yeah, but I mean, I really appreciate and admire all of these comments so far. And I hear and see not only just Naya, Rose, and Yael and the things that they've said, but also our participants who are really putting in some insightful comments. And so we have Andrea, who says that, you know, she has been through so many boot camps, she doesn't know what next step to take or what she's doing wrong. And somebody called Andresa, who read that women usually apply for jobs if only 100% of their skills are described. And so just to Yael's point, that if we don't have mentors who represent or look like the applicants, or at least the students who are trying to get to certain levels in tech, then it's very difficult to picture yourself in those positions if you're from a underrepresented background. But also just taking a broader, just a step back and thinking about that structural issue. I think that the last 18 months, I mean, coming to the question of why now, has revealed existing kind of fractures and fault lines in our society. And so it's not something that has just kind of like happened all of a sudden with the pandemic. The pandemic has revealed things that have been with us all along. And the Black Lives Matter protests have also revealed the importance and urgency of thinking about racial inequities in our systems, which just exacerbate a lot of these structural issues. There's a report that I have pulled up right now by the Bureau of Labor Statistics that says that over the course of the first 10 months of the pandemic, women, particularly women of color, have lost more jobs than men, as industries dominated by women have been hit the hardest. And that women have lost a net of 5.4 million jobs during the recession, nearly 1 million more job losses than men. So that's just the first 10 months. And that's not even including unpaid care and reproductive work that self-identified women, as Yael was saying, participate in. And so this isn't just an easy solution to say, oh, learn how to code, build up your technical skills. We can't just bandage over issues that have been plaguing us for decades and decades. I think that in order to really attend to a lot of the issues that are at hand, we need to think about problems of inequity and gender inequity more broadly in the job market, both paid and unpaid. And as the world becomes more technical, then we need to think about, okay, then how do women and people from minoritized backgrounds then prepare themselves to enter into a labor market that is becoming more technical, not only at mid-level skills, but also mid-level entry jobs, but also at entry-level jobs and higher up. And so for me, because of where I am right now, I feel like a lot of that begins at education. I think it also begins before people enter into college in K through 12, understanding or becoming literate in technical skills so that we can build a virtual world that is better than the physical world that we live in, and trying to solve some of the inequities that we're living with, and hoping to also make our physical world better at the same time. And so if we are living with certain inequities in our everyday lives, then we can't expect the virtual world that we build to be any less unequal than the world that we're currently living in. And so if we equip people and women and people from minoritized backgrounds with the right skills, then we can expect that the technology and the platforms that we use to be a little bit better. And so that's
that's kind of where I see at least education playing a part.
Yeah, I mean, that's really powerful. And thanks, Andrea, for that, really honest reflection of the current status that you're in. And we'll actually get to some practical points later as well in the conversation. I've got a teenage daughter, and she just, she's very strong at math and science. She doesn't get enough. I live in Silicon Valley, and she doesn't get enough exposure to the types of jobs available, what potentially she could do in the future. I read something else recently where it said that 60% of teachers have actually admitted that that they have this sort of unconscious gender bias when it comes to STEM subjects towards boys, and so it's it is structural, systemic. There's massive issues that we need to address. Rose, I'm going to come back to you, and then Rebecca. Do you guys think things have changed, have improved? I know we've had these recent setbacks, but where do you think things have actually gotten better? Because I hope there's some things have gotten better. I'm hoping.
Yeah, I think what we're talking about in terms of what our children are seeing, I've definitely seen improvements there to an extent. I've got my daughter is 10, so she's in the 5th grade, and I know Deeps, we were talking about this in preparation, that she's really keen at math, but she doesn't want to go into the advanced math class because it's all boys.
Yeah.
And we work really hard at okay, how do we get over this mental mindset? And it's disheartening to know that at 10 years old you're already feeling that way. But I also think back to when I was that age, there was no advanced math class that I could have even competed for. And, I'm one of her Girl Scout leaders, and, my job, I always say I do all the STEM badges with them because I want them to know. And so I work really hard to bring in, women engineers and, women data scientists to help with these badges. So these girls can see there are women in these fields, right? Like if you can't see it, you can't be it kind of thing. And so we try to make sure it's there. So I love that. Even I sometimes ask, is it just lip service? Do people really care about STEM activities for young girls? I see it some places, I see it done. So I definitely think there's been improvement there. I will say that in the course of my 20 years at Allstate, the number of women in our tech roles has grown significantly, but it's because we were basically starting from zero. I feel like our tech department used to literally be in a building on our campus all by itself with its own cafeteria. There was no need to mix and mingle. And being in learning and development, I would have to go up there and do training sometimes. And it would be like a shock to the system, 20 years ago, if I saw a woman in a class about something. And so now when we go in and I see several female faces, that's great. We have several female officers in our tech space, which is great. Where I think it's been a lot better is how we have seen technology and those skills spread into multiple roles that are traditional female roles. So I look at my role, leading learning and development in a human resources department. You don't get more female at a company than human resources. And my role and what I do has changed so much, where when we first started, I was like a tech expert because I knew how to run a WebEx. And now, I get to engage with all of these great ed tech companies, and I have to be able to hold my own, and I have to be able to have that conversation. So even though I don't necessarily have any kind of credentials in the tech space, it's become a personal passion to upskill myself and make sure that I'm doing my part and making sure that our company is operating with the best tech. And I see that spread across all of our departments. The marketing department is another great example, and corporate relations. Those are two areas within companies that are often very female focused, and seeing all of the tech upskilling there. So there's a little bit of give and take. I'll take the wins where I can get it, that we're seeing women upskill themselves in tech skills in the areas where they sit. But we've got a lot more work to do, definitely, in our technology department and making sure that we've got more representation there.
That's very helpful. Rebecca, did you have any additional thoughts there?
Yeah, I can speak to what we've seen and done at Flatiron School over the years. I think, one kind of cohort of student, one kind of background of student that we see a lot is a musician or an artist or a writer who comes to Flatiron School having discovered code or data science, somewhere else and started playing around with it, decides that they really want to do this, and says, this is one of those stories that I hear over and over again over time, that I didn't realize how much this craft is like my other craft, is like creating music, is like creating art. Right, I'm using this alphabet, I'm creating something from nothing. It's artistic, it's expressive. I think one of the things that we can do, and you see this in some of the academic institutions that are trying to address more female students, we certainly do this intentionally as well, is changing the way that we describe what technical skills and crafts are, rather than like a competitive ninja that's going to win, as a creator that's bringing something to life and, using a library that you've mastered to create art or craft. And I've heard over and over again that students who come from those backgrounds find that analogy themselves when they get into the discipline. And of course we can change the way we talk about it on the front end, right? Because that's the reality of what this is. It's collaborative, it's expressive, it's creative. And the other thing that I would say is the way that we do education for technology. Another one of these stories that I hear over and over again, particularly from female students, is that they took a computer science class in college, but they were scared away, or it wasn't fun. It wasn't the way that they like to learn. It didn't feel collaborative. It didn't feel creative. It felt competitive and not where they wanted to be. I get that. I was a liberal arts kid too. And I liked the classes where we talked about ideas and wrote commentary on them. It's not that different. Again, it's not that different from writing code. So we can change the way that we're teaching these things to attract a wider kind of set of proclivities and ways of learning. A lot of our curriculum is meant to be narrative and storytelling rather than kind of technical documentation and very dry. And we've found that curriculum like that engages, really, I would say everyone, because nobody loves technical documentation as an introduction into a thing. It's more engaging for a wider swath of folks than kind of the personality that would traditionally learn this, maybe self-teach alone. Very different personality than a one that wants to collaborate and create together and kind of learn something and express something through a story or a narrative.
It's almost more approachable, accessible. It feels more friendly, right? Or you can. It sounds like it resonates more. So I like the way that you guys have thought about your curriculum, and it seems to be working. I wanted to sort of think about now moving into sort of the practical tips before we open up, soon to Q&A. The practical tips, and I'm going to actually start with Naya here. Just there's a stat I read recently, which again, stats can be very shocking and they're useful, but there's truths behind all of this. There's people behind all of these stats. But there's a stat that says that there's 28% of women in the tech workforce, and there's only 2.2 of who are Black, and and 1.7 from a Latinx background. So what's interesting is, we talk about this as being a multi-layered issue. If you are in that particular, you have that particular background, let's say, how do you think, just practical steps? I know you talk about this a lot on your YouTube channel, which I love. How do you think about, what kinds of advice would you give folks, to be able to move forward in really intentional steps? And you've done it yourself, right? I mean, you pivoted from finance to technology. So I'd love to hear just specific ideas that you might have to help.
Yeah, I did this myself. I graduated with a finance degree and then attended Flatiron School within like 3 weeks of that graduation date after discovering this whole new world of code. And something I had actually mentioned to all of you before was that I loved my Flatiron experience so much because the teachers were so diverse. There was a white male, a white woman, a Black male, a Hispanic male, an Asian woman. And it was just so diverse where you kind of saw yourself in all these different spheres. And so when I was really stuck on issues and really stuck on concepts and homeworks, it's so easy to get into the mindset as a woman or a person of color in a predominantly white male space of, okay, yeah, they're right. Like, women can't do this. Like, I can't do this. They were right about me. I can't get through this. But by seeing that, no, like, my teachers are people of color, it helped me say, like, no, it's not because I am X and X that I can't get through this chapter, because the person teaching me has that same identity. And so, no, let me just keep on pushing forward and keep on going. And a lot of times, for people, that's kind of where it stops, of like, okay, yeah, my entire system, all the professors and everything, they're all white males, and they don't see me, and they can't provide me the things I need to be a student and be and achieve. And so really the biggest thing I have talked about in overcoming this on my YouTube is to find somebody that you can latch onto to help you get through this. So whether it be a mentor, a teacher, a peer, find somebody who is ideally in that space that you're trying to reach, because now you have this person right there that you know they did it. And so it becomes less about your identity being the reason why you can't get X and X, no matter how often society has tried to tell you that it is. And it's more about, okay, I just can't figure out this, and this. And so let me switch up my learning style. Let me ask for a different teacher to go through this X, Y, and Z. And you start finding solutions to get through what you need to get through. It becomes a learning problem than an identity crisis regarding the field you're trying to enter. And so that's really the biggest thing I can say, is find those people. But then when you read those stats, it's hard when there's 2.2% of women of color in the tech field. It's hard to find those people. And so that's where I very much advocate for spaces like LinkedIn and joining Slack channels and Facebook groups. I'm in all of these different things dedicated to people of color in tech or women of color in tech and STEM. And it does a lot to help in that motivation, because it's not that you're not good enough. It's that you need to overcome the that isolated feeling. And so the best way to do that is by joining spaces that you do see yourself in.
That's amazing advice. Saima, do you have additional thoughts?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I completely agree with what Naya is saying, and I'm just going to hammer this point, is that really trying to diversify the types of people that feel like they can enter into tech fields is really, really important. And so I've heard from so many students who've taken courses at Columbia that tend to be a little bit more male-dominated computer science courses, that also get intimidated out of the course because they don't see themselves represented, and they feel like they're inferior and they're learned differently. And so I just want to put out a note of caution that I'm not sure if changing the way the curriculum is taught so that female identifying students are drawn to these disciplines is necessarily the right way to go, because there's the implication that then females learn differently. And I'm not sure if that's the direction that we want to go in. It may be instead that diversifying these fields, lowering the barrier of entry, starting to expose students, women and non-binary students, to STEM fields so that they are familiar with that by the time they enter into these classrooms where they may not see themselves as much, that they still feel confident that they can take on the topic, is really, really important. And the friends that I speak to who are in the big tech companies, it's not as though they're not trying to hire a more diversified group of employees. It's partly also that they may not have the right applicants, or they may not be getting the kinds of applicants that can help them to diversify the companies. And so this is, again, like, we're getting back to the structural issues again, is that, you know, how early on are women and people from minoritized backgrounds exposed to certain STEM fields, and when will they feel comfortable enough to try to attempt it on their own and take advantage of various opportunities. And so I think that, you know, scholarships and programs and, you know, other kinds of initiatives, as well as these more formalized boot camps and education programs, are really, really important to supplement the skills buildings that's out there for women who want to build tech skills.
I mean, let's build on what you just said. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Rose.
I was going to just latch on really quick, because it made me think about, too, the fact, you know, big companies tend to go and recruit from the same schools. And when you get down to it, when you ask, well, why those schools? You end up finding out dirty secrets, like, well, that's the alma maters of our top executives. It's not necessarily, well, that's because that's where we see large populations of women or BIPOC men studying this field that we're trying to diversify in. So it's something that, you know, I often encourage my, you know, counterparts at other companies, like, ask the question, pose the question, why are we going there? Even a lot of companies will tote, oh, well, we're going to recruit from historically Black colleges and universities. It's very trendy right now. Well, do some research and find out there's plenty of other schools that don't fall in the HBCU category that have high populations of Black students that we could be going and recruiting from there as well. Now, I always joke around, like, I went to a tiny liberal arts school no one's ever heard of. And so no big companies were coming to my school to come and recruit people. It doesn't mean there's not talented, intelligent students there that are studying exactly what we're trying to do. So, like, that's a big push, you know, that I try to encourage is go after. There's plenty of really great schools teaching these tech skills that aren't giant universities that everybody is going to recruit at. I'm like, I don't want to compete against Google and Amazon. Let's go find a school that they're not going to, that still has a really great program.
That's really powerful. Actually, Rose, you know, from an organization point of view, that's amazing advice. Yael, I'd want to get your thoughts as well, because there's something interesting here. I know that one of your pet frustrations working with you is, you know, just lack of access, lack of opportunity, lack of thinking about things in a unique and different way. I read this really brief, this study, I'm watching the clock here as well. They did a study of 80,000 social media posts on Reddit, and a large percentage of women, this was a study about, you know, women's attitude, sort of claiming view on technology jobs. And what they found was a large percentage said, it's not for people like them, which is absolutely tragic. Do you think companies can do something different? You know, Rose mentioned some things to do, which is, you know, expand the pool. Don't just because we went there for the last 40 years doesn't mean it's going to be the, you know, the places we should go in the future. Is there other things that companies can do organizationally, like to find talent, to grow talent, you know, so that, and also to help sort of shift those attitudes around, this isn't the type of career for me as a female? Yeah,
I think honestly, and I'm glad that, you know, Deeps, you mentioning that means so everyone knows I really do talk about this a lot. So I'm truly passionate enough about it that probably doesn't take long for someone to interact with me to know that. But in general, I think it's actually everything that everyone has said on this panel, and it's yes and. And so when you're talking about some of the really tactical pieces of advice that organizations can do, Rose is actually literally articulating some of the playbook that I wish all companies had a Rose, frankly, and we're able to have, like, we're like just more of them. It needs that and more. It's yes and everywhere. And there's, I mean, tens of thousands of employees at Allstate alone, right? Rose is one person. You know, it doesn't work to just have one person, even if you're shouting from the rooftops. It takes more and more of a groundswell, of a movement, of people taking specific actions, like making the kind of sometimes hard question ask of like, why are we recruiting there? Or like, why are we requiring this? Or why is this job rec described in this way? I actually think that like Rebecca's point is a great one also earlier of like, I literally have seen job descriptions that say ninja. Why do they say ninja? Who needs a ninja? Nobody actually needs a ninja in these fields that we're talking about. Like, so don't like use that language unless you're intentionally trying to exclude people who don't identify with the word ninja. So if you're not trying to exclude them, then perhaps reevaluate the way that you're talking about this. So there's like tons of tools out there, like a Textio, a million different tools out there that you can run your job recs through to be able to say, hey, am I using inclusive language here? I think that from like in some ways, I think Simon's point is it's valid, and it's like it's not that women learn necessarily differently, but it's about reframing. What does it mean to identify as a technical person? Am I being inclusive in my framing of that? Am I being intentional about saying, it's like this or it's like this? And you can change the way that you frame it in different rooms, and that's totally fine. It's kind of like product marketing, or it's kind of like any other types of ways that you use a language, right? It's about seeing who is the, what is my intent? What is the group that I am speaking with? What is the best way to get my intent across to this group that I am speaking with? And it's okay to change that in different situations, as long as you're being intentional about the process that you approach something with. And it's, I think, a fantastic suggestion that Naya made of like, join all the groups, like join all the Slack groups. I have a million different Slack groups on my, that I don't really check that often, thankfully. I just have them all on mute. But like, if I ever am trying to go and recruit for something, I know that I can drop it in these 5 different places, and like, just in case, right? Just in case, in addition to all these other channels, just because you never know who's going to come through that channel. You never know who's not looking in the traditional places because they become disheartened. So being really intentional about adding those top of funnel touch points. I think a lot about, one of the biggest things you can do from a recruiting standpoint, from a talent perspective, is concentrated top of funnel. If you're being intentional about the way that you structure your funnel from a talent perspective, it doesn't hurt to go and get some concentrated top of funnel, whether it's an HBCU or a, Black Girls Who Code, or any number of different types of organizations or institutions, to be able to actually have that concentrated. And it's okay if you flex the, requirements or what have you, as long as the rest of the funnel is being, appropriate in doing what it's doing. It won't necessarily take more of your time, right? It won't be necessarily more resource intensive, as long as you're being intentional. What are the resources that you need? What is the best way to actually achieve the desired outcome? Okay, great. And then start actually measuring it. So measurement, and then accountability, and then iterating on what works. So what does my pipeline look like at the top of funnel? What does it look like at the middle of the funnel? What does it look like in terms of the people that I've hired? What does that organization look like from, entry-level employees all the way up to the top? And so then when you're thinking about all the different components of it, where are the drop-off points and why are they there? And evaluate, what does that mean from a structural perspective? What am I not thinking about, right? And so one thing that we talk about at LearnIn, for instance, is like, one of the biggest barriers to upskilling is time. People say they don't have time to learn. Guess who extra doesn't have time? People who have additional responsibilities, a long commute, are taking care of elderly ones, little ones, have maybe health issues, a million different factors that go into it. And so if you're requiring people to upskill themselves on their own time, on their own dime, you're gonna have a lot of people who look like a lot of other people who are probably making up the upper echelons of your organization, and it's not necessarily going to be representative or diverse or inclusive. Okay, great. So now what does that mean? Maybe you have a rotational program, or maybe you have a leadership program, or maybe you have something really intentional in your organization to bring more people in a concentrated way through scheduled on company time, supported with company resources, whatever the case may be. I'm just, making this up, right? So what is the intended outcome? What is the best way to achieve that outcome? And what is the best way to do so in an inclusive way? Because you know that it matters, because you know that diverse organizations are more likely to outperform, because you know that people who are coming from underrepresented backgrounds oftentimes have more resilience and persistence and will crush because they can, because in order to get to the point that they have already, they have. And so there's a lot of these different components that, I think, when you're being intentional about it, you just have to be questioning, what are my own biases, right? Like, and I have them, we all have them. There's unconscious bias everywhere. Being continually iterating on your process and your approach is I think one of those things, and holding yourself accountable and those throughout the other stakeholders around you as well, I think is all really important.
Thanks, Yael. So I'm going to open up to questions. We'll probably get a couple of questions in here. Here's the first question. Is there a question? Check the box around. I'm just reading the question about HBCUs that everyone can see as well. Look, it is a debate around, whether it's the in thing or not. I think there is a discussion to be had around, just going into the details around what do the populations look like across these different institutions, and how can we best leverage that population for the needs that we have inside. That's my 2 cents on this topic, but it's obviously requires a broader conversation. I know we only have a few minutes, so here's what I'd like to suggest to anyone who has questions. Put them in the chat, and then we'll send them out to the panelists. We'll actually get you answers to these questions post-panel. This topic is so meaty, there's so many layers that we probably can't do justice in the next few minutes. So what I might do is to ask each of you, maybe just one piece of advice, 15 seconds, 30 seconds, just what you would like to see someone who is trying to move into tech or trying to move into a technology type role, or even get promoted inside the organization. Just some advice. It could be personal advice that you've had to handle yourself. So if I could go around, and I'll start with Rose on this one.
Yes, so I see a question coming in that I'll hit on kind of in the end here. So okay. If you're trying to get promoted within a current company, or if you're trying, if you are, someone who's at a different stage in their career than entry level, I would encourage focus on credentials and not degrees. That at this point, there's more value in stacking different credentials, which you're going to be able to accumulate faster and for less money than if you try to go back and get a 4-year degree in one of these. And that's more attainable if you are at a more mature point in your career, and something that you'll be on the front edge of it, that a lot of companies are trying to understand a little bit better, but probably a better return on investment over time than giving up your job, going back to school, or trying to fit it in at night, on top of all your other responsibilities. So that would be my piece of advice there.
Thank you. Rebecca? Speaking of credentials, is Rebecca frozen? Is the screen frozen? Yes. Naya, I'll go to you.
Yeah, when it comes to the switch itself, I think a great thing to focus on is more untraditional paths towards the job. So looking at, okay, who can I contact on LinkedIn? Who can I contact via, again, Facebook groups, and developing those relationships so that when your name does pop up on applications and things like that, that person's like, oh, that's the person I just spoke to. That's the main thing I did during my job hunt, and it served me well. So that's the biggest advice I have.
Thank you. Saima?
Sure. I'm struck by all of the comments that are coming in from the participants. One I do want to acknowledge is the comment about HBCUs being the in thing. I think that we have to try to talk about the reparative processes that a lot of tech companies actually have to go through, that are part of overlooking large swaths of certain populations that have to do with racial biases that we're not only seeing in the hiring process, but also in the kinds of biases we're seeing in technology that is being produced by predominantly straight white males. And so I really appreciate the comment that came through, and I think we need to acknowledge that. The other thing that I would say is that yeah, I'm just going to repeat it, is if you don't see yourself reflected in the kind of industry or job that you're looking for, seek out mentors. It takes a lot of work, but that's part of the networking. And hopefully we're moving towards a world that is a bit more representative. And we need a more diverse group of people in tech in order to build a more inclusive tech. And so I would really encourage people who are older, who are caretakers, who are thinking of career transitions to really, to feel encouraged and confident and competent enough to do it, and try to seek out mentors, including anyone on this panel, and find people who are there to kind of support you through the process.
Thank you. And Yael, very quick, 15 seconds.
Yeah. So everything that everyone has said here has been really actionable. I am happy to be helpful however I can, but the specific things I would tell you are don't give up. Literally don't give up. If you think you belong in a room and the first door is closed, look for a window, look for another room, look for a person who's in the room who can open the door for you. Literally anything, just don't give up. I think there's a lot of people who are really well intentioned, not just on this panel, but throughout the world. Like I do believe that people are good intentionally. You know, sometimes they don't know exactly how to do the things. Sometimes you can just walk them through and show them the light. You know, I'd say just believe in yourself, never give up. You know, there's a million different opportunities out there. Yeah, let's get more inclusive in tech.
So what I'll ask, I want to say thank you to all of you. I really appreciate your insights, your thoughts, so meaningful, the conversation. This is such a big conversation to have, but we tried to do as much as we could in an hour. However, what I think we might put together for the attendees is a Google Doc with resources, links, your contact details, if you don't mind. And also, I got one, there was a question that came up, which was, you know, other networking events or maybe the Slack channels, so that we could actually create, you know, just a helpful set of resources for attendees that they can follow up on. We'll add some other information to it as well, if that's useful. And your website as well, and your YouTube channel as well.
Oh, thank you. But I was going to say, there's a couple questions about where participants can reach this recording.
Yes, and we'll send that out as well as part of the resource document as well. We'll sort of compile everything, and we'll make this very useful for folks and very actionable afterwards as well. Very conscious of time for everyone, so thank you all for, as panelists, for attending, and thank you for our attendees, and hopefully we can put another one of these panels and dig into some of the other topics in the future. So thanks everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. This was
Thanks,
great
Paul.
conversation.
Bye.